Emily had always been the kind of woman who believed that hard work could fix anything. She woke up before sunrise every day, made breakfast for her little boy, and hurried to the small diner where she worked as a waitress. Her uniform was old and faded, her shoes worn out from endless hours on her feet, but she never complained. She had learned long ago that life doesn't give you breaks just because you deserve them. The diner was a simple place, the kind of spot where the smell of coffee mixed with sizzling bacon filled the air, and the sound of clinking dishes never stopped. It wasn't fancy, but to Emily it was her lifeline. She worked double shifts most days, trying to earn enough tips to cover rent, groceries, and the growing pile of unpaid bills. Each night she came home exhausted, her hands sore and her back aching, but she always greeted her son Tyler with a smile. He was only 8 years old, full of energy and dreams, and she wanted to protect that innocence as long as she could. Still, some nights when Tyler fell asleep, Emily sat quietly at the kitchen table, staring at the numbers on her bills. No matter how hard she worked, the money never seemed to be enough. The car payment was late again, and the electricity company had sent another warning. She thought about picking up a third job, but she already barely saw her son. The guilt of leaving him alone too often tore her apart, yet every morning she put on that same brave smile. To her, customers deserved kindness, not the weight of her worries. People came to the diner to escape their own troubles, and she refused to add to theirs. Some regulars noticed her tired eyes and offered polite words, but most were too busy with their own lives to see how much strength hid behind that gentle smile. Emily's co-workers admired her. Even when the manager was in a bad mood or the kitchen was short-staffed, she kept calm. She was the one who stayed late to help others clean up, who comforted new waitresses when they made mistakes. Beneath her quiet nature was a heart full of resilience, the kind that life had tested over and over but never managed to break completely. Sometimes she dreamed of a different life. Maybe going back to school, maybe opening her own small cafe one day. But dreams cost time and money, two things she didn't have. For now, her world was this diner, the steady hum of conversation, the smell of fresh pie, and the hope that tomorrow's tips would be just enough to get by. Her son was her motivation. Every time she looked at Tyler, she reminded herself why she worked so hard. He would often leave her little drawings in her lunch bag, simple pictures of the two of them smiling, holding hands. Those small pieces of love kept her going through the toughest shifts. One rainy morning, Emily walked to work under an old umbrella that barely held together. Her shoes were soaked, but she didn't let it ruin her mood. When she stepped inside, the warm air and familiar sounds made her feel a little better. She tied her apron, brushed her hair back, and prepared for another long day. To her, each customer was a new opportunity. Maybe someone would leave a good tip. Maybe something small would finally go right. But deep down, Emily was tired. Not just physically, but emotionally. She had carried her struggles alone for so long that even kindness felt foreign to her. She had learned not to expect miracles, only to survive one day at a time. Still, she never lost her sense of gratitude. She thanked every customer, smiled even when her feet hurt, and laughed at small jokes just to make others feel comfortable. People often underestimate the quiet strength of women like her, the ones who hold their world together without anyone noticing. Behind that smile was a mother fighting against the odds, doing everything she could to keep her child's life steady and filled with love. That day at the diner started like any other. The sky outside was gray and only a few customers sat at their tables sipping coffee. Emily refilled their cups, wiped down the counter, and chatted politely. She didn't know that fate was about to give her a moment that would change her life forever. For now she was just a struggling waitress, doing her best to survive, unaware that a simple act of kindness was waiting just around the corner. Even though the world hadn't been fair to her, Emily still believed in goodness. She believed that somehow one day all her hard work would pay off, and as she looked at her reflection in the diner's window, tired, yet still standing, she whispered to herself, "Keep going." She didn't know it yet, but someone was about to notice her strength in the most unexpected way, and that moment, born out of her quiet perseverance, would soon turn into a story that would touch millions of hearts around the world. The rain had finally stopped by the time Emily began her afternoon shift. The diner looked brighter now, sunlight slipping through the glass windows, glimmering off the chrome stools and coffee pots. It was one of those quiet afternoons when time seemed to move slowly. A few regular customers sat reading newspapers, and the faint hum of country music played in the background. Emily was wiping the counter, lost in thought, when the doorbell above the entrance jingled. At first, she didn't look up. It was probably another regular coming in for a late lunch. But then she noticed something different. A sudden hush fell over the diner. The usual chatter stopped. She turned toward the door and her eyes widened in disbelief. A man had just walked in, so tall that he seemed to fill the doorway. He wore a gray hoodie, simple jeans, and a kind smile that made him look familiar. Too familiar. It took Emily a second to realize who it was. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Shaquille O'Neal. For a moment she froze, unsure if her tired mind was playing tricks on her. She had seen him on TV so many times. The legendary basketball player, the giant with a gentle heart. But what would Shaq be doing here in this small-town diner? The whispers began almost instantly. Is that really him? No way. It looks just like Shaq. A couple of teenagers by the window pulled out their phones, trying to sneak pictures. Emily stood behind the counter, nervously straightening her apron. Her heart was racing. She had served all kinds of customers before, truck drivers, families, travelers, but never someone like him. She wasn't sure if she should walk up and greet him like she did everyone else or wait for him to approach. Shaq looked around the room, his warm eyes scanning for a seat. When he spotted an empty booth near the window, he smiled and walked over, ducking slightly to fit under the hanging lamp. Even sitting down, he looked larger than life. The manager leaned toward Emily and whispered, "That's all you. You're the best with customers, and go on." Emily's stomach fluttered. She grabbed her notepad, took a deep breath, and walked toward the booth. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to Rosie's Diner. What can I get you today?" Shaq looked up, his eyes kind. "Hey there, how you doing today?" he said in his deep, calm voice. Emily smiled nervously. "I'm good. Just a little surprised," she admitted, trying not to sound starstruck. He chuckled. "I get that a lot," he said, flashing a grin that instantly put her at ease. "Don't worry, I'm just here for a burger and some peace and quiet." She nodded, still amazed by how humble he sounded. "You came to the right place," she said with a soft laugh. "Our burgers are pretty good, and I promise no one will bother you too much." "Sounds perfect," he replied. As Emily walked back to the kitchen, she could still feel her heart pounding. She told the cook, who nearly dropped his spatula in shock. "Shaquille O'Neal? Here, you serious?" "Dead serious," Emily whispered. "And he's sitting at table 6. Please make the best burger you've ever made." When she returned to serve his drink, Shaq struck up a friendly conversation. "You work here long?" he asked. "About 4 years," she said, setting down his iced tea. "It's not easy, but it's honest work." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Hard work always pays off. My mom used to tell me that." That simple line, "My mom used to tell me that," touched something deep inside Emily. She smiled gently. "Mine used to say the same thing." As they talked, she found herself relaxing. Shaq asked about the town, about the diner, and even about her favorite item on the menu. He wasn't just being polite, he was genuinely interested. She told him about the cherry pie, about how the owner baked it fresh every morning, and how some customers drove from 2 towns over just for a slice. "I might have to try that," Shaq said, smiling. When his food arrived, he thanked her with that same warmth in his voice. Emily walked away, but she couldn't help glancing back a few times. He wasn't glued to his phone like most people. He ate quietly, occasionally chatting with other customers who shyly came up to greet him. He took pictures, signed napkins, and even made a little girl laugh by pretending to balance a salt shaker on his huge hand. Everyone could feel his presence, not because he was famous, but because he carried himself with kindness. But what Emily didn't realize was that while she was observing him, he was quietly observing her too. He noticed how she smiled at every customer, how she rushed to refill coffee before anyone asked, and how she covered for her younger coworker when the girl made mistakes. He saw the fatigue in her eyes, the kind of tiredness that comes from fighting battles alone. When he finished his meal, Emily brought the check to his table. "Did you enjoy everything?" she asked politely. He smiled. "Best burger I've had in a while," he said. "And even better service." Her cheeks turned pink. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." He nodded, took the check, and reached for his wallet. "You take care of yourself, all right?" he said softly. "I will." she replied, though she didn't quite believe it. As he stood to leave, she noticed him scribbling something on a piece of paper. He folded it neatly, tucked it under the receipt, and walked out the door with a quiet wave. The diner fell silent for a moment. Everyone stared as the massive man stepped into his car and drove away. Emily hadn't yet seen what he left behind. The note, the message, the surprise that would soon bring her to tears. For now, she just stood there, stunned by the fact that she had just served Shaquille O'Neal. But what she didn't know was that the real miracle hadn't happened yet. Emily stood at the counter, still trying to process what had just happened. The man who had just walked out, the one whose presence had filled the diner like sunlight, was Shaquille O'Neal. She'd watched him on TV countless times, laughing during interviews, giving back to communities, and helping strangers in ways that made headlines. But seeing him in real life sitting in her section talking to her like an old friend, that felt unreal. Yet it wasn't just his fame that left an impression on her. It was his kindness. The way he had looked at her, not as a waitress, not as someone beneath him, but as a person. That small moment of respect meant more to her than she could ever explain. But what Emily didn't know was that this story wasn't finished yet. Shaq hadn't just come in for a burger. Something about her had caught his attention, something in her quiet strength that reminded him of his own mother. As the lunch rush ended, the diner grew calm again. A few customers lingered, sipping their coffee and chatting softly. Emily began cleaning up, wiping tables and stacking plates. The sound of soft jazz filled the air, and the smell of fresh pie drifted from the kitchen. Everything seemed ordinary again, except for one thing. Table 6, where Shaq had been sitting, was still untouched. No one dared to sit there yet. It was as if the booth itself carried a little magic. About an hour later, just as she was wiping down the counter, the doorbell chimed again. Her head lifted and her heart nearly stopped. Shaquille O'Neal had returned. He ducked his head slightly to enter, smiling that same warm smile. "Forgot something," he said with a playful tone. Emily blinked, surprised. "Oh, you? You're back." "Yeah," he chuckled. "Didn't get to try that cherry pie you told me about." Her nervous laugh escaped before she could stop it. "Well, we can't let you leave without that, can we?" He grinned. "Guess not." The other customers stared in amazement, whispering to one another. Emily quickly grabbed a menu, though she already knew what he wanted. She brought him a slice of pie, fresh and steaming, with a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top. Shaq took a bite and leaned back, satisfied. "You weren't kidding," he said. "That's some good pie." "I told you," she said, smiling. "My boss says the secret ingredient is love." He laughed, a deep, hearty sound that made everyone nearby turn and smile. "Love, huh? That's what makes everything better." For a few moments they just talked. Not about fame, not about basketball, but about life. Shaq asked about the town, small, quiet, but full of hardworking people. He asked about her son, and she told him about Tyler, how he loved drawing, how he wanted to be a pilot someday, and how he always made her laugh, even on her hardest days. Shaq listened carefully, nodding as if every word mattered. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't in a hurry. He was present. And that made Emily feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. At one point she joked, "You know, you've probably made more people smile in your life than anyone I've ever met." He smiled softly and said, "That's the goal. My mama taught me to leave every place better than I found it, even if it's just a smile." Those words stayed with her. As the afternoon sunlight shifted, Emily noticed a couple of kids lingering outside the diner, peeking in through the window. When Shaq noticed them, he smiled and waved. Within seconds, they rushed inside, shy but excited. "Hey, big man," one of them said, staring up at him like he was a superhero. Shaq laughed. "You hoop?" The boy nodded proudly. "I try." "Keep trying," Shaq said, reaching out his massive hand for a fist bump. The boy's tiny hand disappeared in his. Everyone in the diner laughed softly at the sight. Emily watched with her heart full. For the first time in a long while, the diner felt different. Alive, happy, light. For once, she wasn't just tired Emily, the waitress. She was part of something special. When the kids left, Shaq turned to her again. "You ever get time off?" he asked. She laughed quietly. "Not really. Single mom life. Bills don't take days off," he nodded knowingly. "Yeah, I know that feeling. My mom worked hard too. Real hard." Something in his voice changed. Gentle, thoughtful, almost protective. He didn't say much more, but his eyes said enough. He understood. As Emily refilled his drink, she noticed him scribbling something on a napkin, quietly folding it, then tucking it under his plate. She didn't think much of it at the time. She just thought maybe it was a doodle or a note for the staff. When Shaq finally stood to leave, he extended his hand. "Thank you, Emily," he said, his voice sincere. "You take care of yourself and that boy of yours, all right?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Wait, how did you know my son's name?" He smiled. "You mentioned him. Tyler, right?" "Oh," she said, feeling her cheeks warm. "Yes, that's right," he nodded. "He's lucky to have you." And with that, he turned and walked out once again. Towering, calm, leaving behind an energy that felt almost too good to be real. Emily stood by the booth, staring after him. Something about his tone, his presence. It felt like there was more to it. Slowly, she reached for the folded napkin he had left behind. But before she could open it, another customer called her name from across the diner, and she quickly tucked it into her apron pocket, promising herself she'd read it later. What she didn't know yet was that this simple napkin, this small folded piece of paper, held words that would bring her to tears and change the direction of her life forever. The diner had started to quiet down again, but Emily's heart was still racing. Even after Shaquille O'Neal left, his presence seemed to linger in the air like a warm glow. The other waitresses whispered about him nonstop, how tall he was, how kind, how humble. The customers who had been lucky enough to be there during his visit couldn't stop smiling. But for Emily, the moment felt more personal. She slipped her hand into her apron pocket and felt the soft crinkle of the folded napkin. She wanted to open it, but she didn't, not yet. Something in her heart told her to wait until she was alone. She didn't know why, but it felt like that small piece of paper carried more than just words. As the clock ticked toward closing time, the golden light of the sunset poured through the windows. Emily cleaned the tables, humming softly to herself. The smell of coffee and baked pie filled the room, and the soft sound of a radio played somewhere in the kitchen. It was peaceful, but beneath that peace a deep ache still lived inside her. All day she had been holding back her exhaustion. Her feet throbbed, her shoulders ached, and inside her heart felt heavy. She thought about the stack of bills on her kitchen counter, the landlord's last warning, and the car that might not make it through another week. She thought about her son Tyler's shoes that had holes in them, and how she'd promised to buy him a new pair soon, even though she wasn't sure how. Life had been unfair lately. Every time she tried to catch her breath, something new went wrong. A medical bill, a broken appliance, a missed payment. It felt like she was running a race she could never win, yet no one knew. To the world, she was just a smiling waitress with kind eyes, but behind that smile was pain. The kind of pain that comes from fighting alone. The kind that makes you cry silently at night so your child doesn't hear. The kind that builds quietly in your chest until even small acts of kindness feel overwhelming. When Shaq had looked at her earlier, there had been something different in his eyes. Something that made her feel like he saw that pain. Not in a pitying way, but in a way that said, "I understand." She hadn't felt that kind of understanding in years. Later that night, after the last customer left and the neon open sign was turned off, Emily sat at one of the booths staring at the folded napkin. The diner was empty now. The air was still. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the back. She unfolded the napkin slowly, her hands trembling a little. But it wasn't the right moment. The cook called her name from the kitchen. "Emily, you mind locking up the back door?" She quickly folded the note again, tucking it safely into her pocket. "Yeah, I got it," she replied. On the walk home, the night air was cool and quiet. Streetlights flickered and puddles from the earlier rain reflected the stars. She walked carefully, holding her umbrella even though it wasn't raining anymore. Her uniform was wrinkled and her shoes squeaked softly with every step. When she reached her small apartment, she opened the door quietly so she wouldn't wake Tyler. But as always, he was waiting up for her, sitting cross-legged on the couch drawing in his sketchbook. "Mom, you're home," he said with a big smile. She dropped her purse and hugged him tightly. "Hey, baby, you should be asleep by now. I wanted to show you what I drew," he said proudly, holding up his paper. It was a picture of the two of them, holding hands, smiling with the words "Me and Mom, best team ever" written at the top. Her eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful, honey," she whispered. You're getting so good at drawing. He grinned. Did you have a good day? She hesitated. Yeah, actually I did. You know who came into the diner today? He shook his head eagerly. Shaquille O'Neal. His eyes widened. No way, the basketball guy? The tall one? Emily laughed. The very tall one. He came in for lunch twice. He was really nice too, Tyler gasped. Did you get his autograph? She smiled softly. No, sweetheart. I didn't, but he did leave me something. She reached into her apron pocket and took out the folded napkin. For a moment she just stared at it. Part of her was afraid to open it now. Afraid that it might just be something simple, something ordinary, and all the magic she'd felt today would fade away. But then, slowly she opened it. Inside, written in neat handwriting, were the words, and thank you for your kindness. I can see your strength. Never stop believing. Your hard work will pay off. Shaq. For a moment she couldn't move. The words seemed to glow on the paper. She blinked back tears as she read them again and again. They weren't just words. They were recognition. Someone had seen her struggle. Someone had seen her strength. Tyler leaned over to read it too. Wow, he whispered. He wrote that for you? She nodded slowly, her throat tight. Yeah, he did. And then she noticed something else. Tucked inside the napkin was an envelope. Her heart pounded as she opened it. And inside she found a stack of cash. More than she had ever seen in one place before. Her hand covered her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. Oh my God, she whispered. Tyler looked confused. Mom, what is it? She hugged him close, crying and laughing at the same time. It's kindness, baby. It's just kindness. That night, long after Tyler had fallen asleep, Emily sat by the window staring at the city lights. She held the note in her hands, feeling both small and infinite at the same time. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she'd lost, and hope. And though she didn't know it yet, that one note from a stranger would become a symbol of everything she believed in. That good people still exist. And that even when life feels impossible, miracles can find you when you least expect them. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of Emily's small apartment, casting soft golden lines across the floor. She sat at the kitchen table, the note and envelope still in front of her, as if she was afraid that if she looked away they might vanish. The words Shaquille O'Neal had written still echoed in her mind. I can see your strength. Never stop believing. It wasn't just the money that had changed something inside her. It was the feeling that someone had noticed her struggle. For years she had worked silently, invisible to most people who came and went from the diner. But now, one man's simple act had broken through the walls she'd built around her heart. Still, Emily couldn't stop wondering why. Why her? Why that day? She knew Shaq was famous for being generous, but something about his note felt personal, as if he'd sensed something she had never said aloud. At breakfast, Tyler sat munching on cereal, his small feet swinging beneath the chair. Mom, are you going to tell your boss what happened? She smiled softly. Maybe later. For now, I just want to keep it between us. He nodded seriously, as if keeping a secret from the world was a big responsibility. Okay, it's our secret. After dropping Tyler off at school, Emily walked to work with a strange sense of calm. The air felt lighter, her steps easier. The world hadn't changed, but she had. That note had given her something money couldn't buy. A spark of hope. A reason to keep pushing forward. When she arrived at the diner, her coworkers were still buzzing about Shaquille O'Neal's visit. You should have seen social media last night, one of the girls said excitedly. Someone posted a photo of him right here at our diner. It's all over town. Crazy, huh? The cook added with a grin. And you were the lucky one who got to serve him. Emily just smiled. Yeah, it was pretty amazing, she said quietly. She didn't mention the note or the envelope. That part was hers alone. Something private, something sacred. All day she worked as she always did, smiling, serving, listening. But inside she felt different. Each time she refilled a coffee cup or wiped down a table, she thought about Shaq's message. Never stop believing. Those words repeated in her head like a song, steady and comforting. And then something else started to happen, small things. Barely noticeable at first. A customer left her an extra tip saying, "You've got such a warm smile. Made my day." A young couple thanked her for her kindness when she replaced their spilled coffee without charging them. Even her manager, who was usually strict and distant, complimented her for handling a rush hour with grace. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't just surviving, she was living. But what Emily didn't know was that her encounter with Shaquille O'Neal had already begun to ripple far beyond that little diner. Later that week, a local reporter came by asking questions. "We heard Shaq stopped here. Do you know anything about it?" The manager spoke proudly. "Sure did. He sat right there at that booth. Had a burger and pie. Nicest guy you could ever meet." Emily stayed quiet, cleaning tables nearby, her heart thudding. She didn't want to be in the spotlight. What mattered to her wasn't the attention. It was the gesture. That night, after her shift ended, she walked home slowly under the streetlights. The world seemed a little softer now. She could hear laughter from a nearby house, the chirping of crickets, the gentle sound of wind in the trees. For once, she didn't feel like the world was pressing down on her. It felt like it was lifting her up. When she reached home, Tyler was already asleep, clutching his stuffed bear. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "We're gonna be okay, baby." Then, sitting alone by the window, she unfolded the note again. She traced the words with her fingers, her eyes filling with quiet gratitude. She thought about all the times she had doubted herself, all the nights she had cried when no one was watching, and now one stranger's simple words had reminded her that she mattered. The next day, something unexpected happened. When Emily arrived at work, there was a small package waiting for her behind the counter. Her name was written on it in bold handwriting. She frowned. "Who's this from?" Her manager shrugged. "Guy came by early this morning. Big fella, said it was for you." Her heart skipped a beat. She carefully opened the box. Inside was a brand new pair of shoes and a folded note. "Heard your boy likes to draw. These are for you. Keep walking forward. Love, Shaq." Tears filled her eyes instantly. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Not only had he remembered her son, but he had thought enough to send something so thoughtful. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about care. Real human care. That was Shaq's quiet gesture, one that no one asked for, one that didn't need cameras or headlines. It was kindness for the sake of kindness. Emily stood there for a long time, holding the shoes and the note against her chest. She could almost hear Shaq's deep voice saying those same words, "Keep walking forward." And from that day on, she did. She worked hard, but she no longer felt invisible. Every morning when she tied her apron, she carried herself with a little more confidence. When life got heavy again, as it sometimes did, she looked at Shaq's note tucked in her wallet and reminded herself. Someone saw her strength once, and that meant it was real. The gesture had been small, quiet, private, but it had lit a fire inside her that no hardship could ever put out. In a world that often looked past people like her, Shaquille O'Neal had done something rare. He had seen her, truly seen her, and in that moment of kindness he had given her something far greater than a tip or a gift. He had given her faith again. The note had become a part of Emily's life, not just a piece of paper, but a source of strength she turned to on her hardest days. Weeks had passed since Shaquille O'Neal had walked into that small-town diner, but his words still lived in her mind like a quiet melody. "I can see your strength. Never stop believing." Every time she read that line, it felt like a warm hand resting on her shoulder, reminding her that she wasn't invisible anymore. One chilly evening, Emily was sitting by the window with a cup of tea after putting Tyler to bed. The city lights flickered outside and a gentle rain tapped against the glass. She pulled the note out of her wallet and read it again, smiling softly, her heart filled with gratitude. She had faced so many lonely nights wondering how to make ends meet, and yet, this one note reminded her that miracles could come when you least expect them. She thought about writing Shaq a thank you letter, but how could she ever find the right words? How do you thank someone for changing your life without even realizing it? At the diner, things slowly began to shift. Emily's confidence grew. Customers noticed her warmth, her patience, and her quiet charm. The manager, seeing how her positivity drew people in, gave her more shifts, and soon she was making enough to save a little money for Tyler's school needs. But what Emily didn't know was that Shaq's act of kindness had reached farther than she could imagine. Someone had taken a photo of him at the diner that day, a candid shot showing Shaq smiling as Emily poured his coffee. The picture had gone viral online with the caption, "Shaquille O'Neal surprises a hardworking waitress in a small-town diner." Kindness is power. Thousands of people shared it, commenting about how genuine he was, but no one knew what had really happened after he left. The note, the gift, the quiet gesture. To everyone else, it was just another celebrity story. But for Emily, it was the turning point of her life. A week later, the diner phone rang. Emily was cleaning tables when her manager called out, "Emily, someone's asking for you." She frowned, wiping her hands on her apron. "For me?" When she picked up the phone, a woman's cheerful voice greeted her. "Hi, is this Emily Carter?" "Yes, it is," she replied cautiously. "This is Jenny from Good Hearts Network. We share real-life stories of kindness. We recently came across your photo with Shaquille O'Neal, and we'd love to feature your story." Emily's eyes widened. "My story? Yes. People need to hear about everyday heroes like you. Would you be open to a short interview?" For a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't used to attention. She had spent her whole life blending into the background, but something inside her whispered, "Maybe this is what believing in yourself really means." She agreed. That evening, Emily shared everything with the reporter. Her struggles as a single mom, the nights she cried wondering how to feed her son, and the day Shaq walked into her life like a blessing she never expected. She even showed the note, though she kept it pressed close to her heart. When the story went live a week later, it spread like wildfire. Millions of people read it and left comments filled with love and encouragement. This brought me to tears. Shaq is amazing, but that mom's strength is what really shines here. Faith in humanity restored. Emily couldn't believe it. Her inbox filled with messages from strangers across the world. People who said her story gave them hope, who were inspired to be kinder in their own lives. And then one evening, she received another surprise. Her phone buzzed with a notification, an email from an unknown address. She opened it slowly, her heart pounding. It read, "Emily, this is Shaq. I saw your story. You're the real hero here. Keep believing and keep inspiring others. I'm proud of you." For a long moment, Emily just stared at the screen, her hands trembling. She couldn't hold back her tears. To know that he remembered her, that he had read her story, it meant more than she could ever say. The next day, she showed the message to Tyler. His eyes grew wide. "Shaq wrote to us again, Mom?" She laughed through her tears. "He did, baby. He really did." Tyler hugged her tightly. "You see, Mom? You're famous now." She smiled, brushing his hair gently. "No, sweetheart. I'm not famous. I'm just lucky that someone reminded me how strong I am." But deep down, Emily knew it was more than luck. It was faith, kindness, and the mysterious way life brings people together at the right time. Months later, the diner received more business than ever before. People came from nearby towns just to sit at Shaq's booth. Some even asked for Emily by name, wanting to meet the woman whose story had touched their hearts. One afternoon, as she was serving coffee to a young couple, the man said softly, "We came here because of you. Your story gave us hope." Emily paused, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means the world." That night, as she walked home under the quiet glow of streetlights, she thought about the chain of events that had followed that single note. It wasn't just a few words on paper. It was a door that opened her heart to a new chapter of life. It had given her confidence, restored her faith, and reminded her that even in the darkest moments, someone might be watching. Someone who believes in you when you don't believe in yourself. And for Emily, that belief had changed everything. The note wasn't just a memory anymore. It was her symbol of strength, proof that kindness, no matter how small, could ripple across the world and touch countless lives. Emily never imagined that a simple act of kindness could turn her quiet, ordinary life into a story that the whole world would talk about. It started small. One online article, a few kind comments, a few hundred shares. But within days, her story exploded across social media like wildfire. People were reposting her photo with Shaquille O'Neal, quoting the note he had written and sharing their own stories of kindness and gratitude. News outlets picked it up next. Headlines appeared everywhere. Shaquille O'Neal's note to a single mom sparks global wave of kindness. Waitress's tearful encounter with Shaq inspires millions. Everywhere Emily looked, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, people were talking about her. Some made videos narrating her story. Others sent messages from different countries, telling her how the story gave them hope during their own struggles. At first, Emily couldn't believe it. Her little world, the diner, the small apartment, her simple daily routine, had somehow touched the hearts of millions. She didn't feel like a hero. She was just a woman doing her best to survive, raising her child with love and strength. But now her story had become a symbol of resilience and compassion. One evening, as she scrolled through messages on her phone, she read one that made her stop and tear up. It said, "Dear Emily, I was ready to give up on life. Then I saw your story. You reminded me that there's still goodness in this world. Thank you." She held the phone close to her chest, whispering a silent prayer of gratitude. She realized something powerful. The same way Shaq's note had changed her life, her story was now changing the lives of others. The diner where she worked turned into a local landmark. People drove from neighboring towns, saying they wanted to sit at Shaq's table. Some left little notes of kindness on napkins, and Emily began keeping them in a small box behind the counter. Each one reminded her that kindness never ends. It just passes from one heart to another. Tyler loved it all. He told everyone at school, "My mom is famous because she met Shaq." His teachers congratulated Emily and told her they had shared her story with their students as part of a kindness project. Children wrote letters to her saying things like, "You're the bravest mom ever," and "When I grow up, I want to be like you." Every message made her realize that what had happened wasn't an accident. It was meant to be. Sometimes, she thought, life sends people like Shaquille O'Neal into your path not to rescue you, but to remind you of your own power. But fame wasn't what Emily wanted. She didn't care about cameras or interviews. What mattered to her was using this sudden spotlight for something meaningful. So, when a local charity reached out asking if she'd help with a fundraiser for struggling single parents, she immediately said yes. Standing on that small stage weeks later, with dozens of people gathered in front of her, Emily took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. Her voice trembled at first, but her eyes shone with quiet strength. "I used to believe I was invisible," she said softly. "I thought no one saw how hard I was trying. But then one kind man came along and reminded me that my efforts mattered, that I mattered. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that kindness doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be real." The audience fell silent. Some wiped away tears. Others nodded with empathy. From that day, Emily became a quiet advocate for kindness. She began volunteering at local shelters, bringing food to families who were struggling and writing small notes of encouragement that she left anonymously for strangers. Just like Shaq's note had done for her, she wanted her words to give others hope. Months passed, and Emily's life continued to change in small but beautiful ways. She was invited to appear on a morning TV show to share her story. She wore a simple dress and held Shaq's note in her hands during the interview. When the host asked, "What's the most important thing this experience taught you?" she smiled and replied, "That even the smallest act of kindness can echo across the world. You never know who needs it most." That clip went viral too. People called her the waitress with the note, and everywhere she went, strangers recognized her not as someone famous but as someone real. One day, while she was cleaning tables after a busy shift, her manager came up to her with a proud grin. "You've done something special, Emily. People don't just come here for the food anymore, they come for you. You give them hope." Emily smiled humbly. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." But deep inside, she knew her life had found a new purpose. One afternoon, when things were quiet, she sat at the same booth where Shaq had once sat. She placed her hand on the table, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't just to Shaq, it was to life for showing her that even in struggle, miracles can bloom. Tyler ran up to her then, laughing. "Mom, guess what? I told my teacher that you're a superhero," she laughed, pulling him close.
"Oh, really?"
"And what kind of superhero am I?" He thought for a moment, then said proudly, "You're the superhero who makes people happy." Her eyes softened and she kissed his forehead. "That's the best kind of superhero to be." As the sun set outside the diner, its golden light spilling across the floor, Emily realized how far she had come. From a struggling single mother to an inspiration for millions. And all because one man took a moment to notice her, to remind her that she was strong, and to leave a note that changed everything. But what she didn't yet know, what fate had quietly prepared, was that the story wasn't over. The kindness she once received was about to return to her life in an even bigger, more unbelievable way. Months had passed since the world first heard Emily's story. Life had slowly returned to normal, or at least her new version of normal. The diner was busier than ever, her bills were finally manageable, and Tyler was thriving at school. The viral attention had faded, but the kindness remained. People still left her little notes on napkins. "Keep smiling. You inspire us. Thank you for reminding us that good people exist." But for Emily, the greatest gift was peace. For the first time in years, she felt safe, hopeful, alive. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when everything changed again. The diner was half empty, just a few regulars enjoying late lunches and the low hum of soft jazz playing from the old speaker in the corner. Emily was wiping down the counter, humming to herself. When the doorbell chimed, she glanced up and froze. The man standing in the doorway was tall and impossibly tall, wearing a simple gray hoodie and a gentle smile that seemed to light up the whole room. It was him, Shaquille O'Neal. For a moment, Emily just stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. The rag slipped from her hand. It was as if time had stopped. Shaq grinned and said in that familiar deep voice, "You remember me?" She let out a small laugh that was half shock, half disbelief. "How could I forget?" He chuckled and walked toward the same booth he'd sat in months ago. The entire diner fell silent. Even the cook peeked out from the kitchen, eyes wide. "I was driving through town," Shaq said as he sat down. "Thought I'd grab a burger and maybe see an old friend." Emily blinked back, the tears forming in her eyes. "You came back?" He nodded. "Of course. I saw your story on the news. I read what you said about kindness. You got people believing again. You changed lives, Emily." She shook her head, still in disbelief. "No, Shaq, you changed mine." He smiled, that warm, gentle smile she'd never forgotten. "Maybe. But you took that kindness and passed it on. That's what makes it special." She brought him his usual order, a double cheeseburger and a slice of apple pie, just like the first time. But this time her hands didn't tremble. She felt proud, steady, happy. As they talked, other customers whispered and smiled, but no one interrupted. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about something deeper, something human. When the meal was done, Shaq leaned back and said quietly, "You know, I've been thinking a lot about people like you. Hardworking, honest folks trying to do their best. You remind me of my mom. She worked so hard to raise us." His voice softened. "That's why I wanted to come back. I've got something for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Emily's breath caught. It looked just like the first one. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside wasn't just a note. There were also several documents neatly folded. She unfolded the note first. "Emily, you inspired me. You reminded me that kindness still matters. This world needs more people like you. This isn't charity, and it's a thank you. Use it to build the future you and Tyler deserve. Love, Shaq." Her eyes blurred with tears. She opened the other papers and gasped. It was confirmation of a college fund in Tyler's name, fully paid for by Shaquille O'Neal. She covered her mouth, shaking her head. "Shaq, I can't. This is too much." He raised his hand gently. "It's not too much for a mom who never gave up. You earned this." Her tears finally fell, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from pure gratitude. She reached across the table, her voice trembling. "You don't know what this means to us," Shaq smiled. "Yeah, I do. Because my mom was you once." That one sentence broke her. She cried openly now, no longer holding back, as the whole diner clapped softly, moved by what they were witnessing. Tyler ran in moments later. He'd been at the park nearby and had seen Shaq's car outside. Mom, is it really him?" Shaq laughed, turning to the boy. "Hey, buddy. You've gotten taller since I last saw you." Tyler's eyes sparkled. "You're Shaq. I saw you on TV." "Yeah," Shaq said, smiling down at him. "But your mom's the real star." He knelt down and handed Tyler a small basketball signed with his name and a few words written in bold letters. "Dream big. Work hard. Be kind." Tyler held it like a treasure. "I will, sir." Shaq patted his shoulder gently. "That's what I like to hear." When he stood again, he looked at Emily with pride. "You're doing an amazing job, Emily. Keep shining. The world needs more people like you." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, "Thank you for everything. Not just for this, for seeing me when no one else did." He smiled. Sometimes all people need is to be seen. Then, with a final nod, he left quietly, and no cameras, no reporters, no crowd, just a giant man with a giant heart, leaving behind a trail of kindness once again. Emily and Tyler stood at the door watching him go. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and she felt something deep inside her, peace, gratitude, and purpose. That night, Emily placed Shaq's second note next to the first one in a small wooden box. She didn't need the world's approval or fame. She already had something far greater. Faith and kindness, proof that even in a busy world, goodness still finds its way to those who keep believing. Years later, when Tyler would grow up and go to college, thanks to that fund, he'd keep those notes framed on his wall. He'd tell everyone the story of how his mom met Shaquille O'Neal and how one small act of kindness changed their entire lives. And every time Emily saw those notes, she smiled. Because she knew that sometimes life doesn't give you everything you ask for. It gives you exactly what you need, right when you need it most.